Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be, excuse me, doing the 10.2 support tier list. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe, and check out the rest of the content on the channel as well. We do tier lists for every single patch. We have lots of individual champion guides, lots of topical guides, like how to macro better, how to micro better, understanding items, understanding dodging, understanding the MMR system. Lots and lots of educational content out there. So be sure to check all that out and come by the stream sometime as well. We stream around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night on YouTube. We usually go till about 2 or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a very friendly, chill community. I try to explain as much as I can while I'm playing, and then also field as many questions as I can from the chat. And you get some old man stories in there occasionally as well. So come by. It's a good time. We'd love to have you. Okay, and as always, I will have timestamps in the description so you can jump around to your favorite parts. I'll also have a link to this Google Doc over here on the left, so you can jump around, see your favorite parts there. With each one of these, you can click on it if you get it in the Google Doc, and it'll show you recommended runes, recommended items, and then also have a 1 to 5 rating system for each champion that I'm going to mention here. 1 being the champion is one of the worst at that task. 5 being the champion is one of the best at that task. So lane pressure is how likely is the champion going to be able to get priority. Kill threat is how likely is the champion going to be able to force a kill, particularly during the laning phase. Safety is how safe is the champion, particularly from ganks. Scaling, how well does the champion perform over time. And then reliability is how likely is it that someone can perform well on this champion with a moderate amount of practice over a longer period of time. So part of that is how difficult is the champion to play in terms of mechanics and decisions, but part of it is also how well does the champion fit into the overall meta right now. And you can also speed the video up if you'd like. Just hit the little cog button, the settings, and take it up to 1.5. If you think the video is a little bit too long, you can probably still understand me pretty well and just kind of zip through the video like that, if that helps you out and you're strapped for time. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. Before we talk about the actual champions, I just want to make the case for Frozen Heart. Frozen Heart was buffed on this patch, and it seems pretty innocuous. It's only like 10 armor. A lot of commentators are going to say that really doesn't matter that much, but I think it matters quite a bit, and also Frozen Heart is really undervalued in a lot of teams right now, particularly with the amount of AD that we're seeing pretty much in every role. So if we look at some of the different roles, for example, if we look at even like mid lane, like what are some of the popular picks mid lane? Okay, well, Yasuo and Zed are the 2 most popular picks right now. And then it does, pretty much go into magic damage from there. But there are, 2 of the most popular ones are AD. And then Talon usually shows up occasionally in there as well. So not a ton of ADs mid, but there are definitely some. Then once you start getting into the jungle, look at the pick rates here. We've got Lee Sin, Jarvan, Master Yi, Kha'Zix, Kayn, Olaf. So there are a couple of magic damage users with Echo and Elise, but once again, a lot of these top-end picks, the most popular picks anyways, are still going to be AD. And then if you look at the top lane, it's Set, Darius, Ornn, Fiora, Garen, Jax, Renekton, Aatrox, Irelia. Almost all AD, with the exception of Mordekaiser, who sneaks in at number 2 most popular. He's banned a lot as well. I guess Set is also. But the major point that I'm saying here is it is not uncommon when you look at the top lane, mid lane, and jungle to have 2 of those as AD. You're almost always going to have at least 1 of those as AD, and then oftentimes you'll have 2. And if you have 2 of them as AD plus a traditional AD carry in the bot lane, that's 3 of your 4 major damage dealers being AD in this meta right now, and that's very common to see that, and that means that armor is extremely valuable right now. So I think that positions Frozen Heart really well just in general, because that is the highest single armor item in the game by a very large margin, right? Like Thornmail has 80 armor, Randuin's has 70, and that's about as close as you're going to get. And then you got Frozen Heart with 110. And armor, there's a common misconception out there that armor has like a lot of diminishing returns against AD champions, like you don't want to be stacking a ton of armor, and that's not really true. Every point of armor means that it takes 1% more of that type of damage to kill somebody. It's the same thing with magic resist. So if you have 1,000 health and 100 armor, it's going to take 100% more physical damage to kill you, so it's going to take 2,000 physical damage to kill you. If you have 200 armor, it's going to be 200%. So it's going to take 3,000 damage to kill you. Okay, so it's always the same. 1 point of armor, 1% more damage to kill you overall. Okay, now the reason that people will say that it falls off is because at a certain point, mathematically, it's going to make more sense if you can to itemize into HP, because your HP is going to be more valuable than trying to buy extra pieces of armor. Because there's only going to be so many good armor items out there. So that's number one, is that armor right now is positioned as a premier defensive stat on a lot of things. Number two, it did just get 10 more armor, so it just got a buff, which is nice. But it also has 20% cooldown on it, which is very unique and is very powerful right now in the meta, because they got rid of the CDR on all of your warding items, right? So those used to come with 10% CDR, not anymore. Transcendence, also really falling off. Almost no one's taking Transcendence anymore. Even Rakan, we'll talk about him here in a little bit. There used to be a Nimbus Cloak Transcendence build, which was kind of popular. That's pretty much gone. Most people are doing Presence of Mind builds, or rather they're doing the... I think people are still doing Presence of Mind Tenacity. Some people are doing Triumph Tenacity. But either way, they're in the Precision tree, and they're not in the Sorcery tree anymore. So I personally like Ghost Poro and Ulti Hunter from the Domination tree. But either way, you're not getting the 10% CDR from Transcendence anymore. So this 20% doesn't go over the cap, because in a lot of games, you're going to have your boots, which are usually going to be Moby boots, or a defensive boot, Ninja Tabby, or Merc Treads. Ionians aren't really that great. You're paying a whole lot in sort of collateral costs by getting Ionian boots. So they're like okay sometimes, but really you'd rather have a defensive boot or Mobies. And then you usually get 3 items if the game completes most of the time, right? If it gets that far, I should say. So you can get Frozen Heart, and then, something like Redemption, Knight's Vow, whatever your other item is, and then one other item that's going to have 10% on it. So it's the only, major viable item that you might get on support that's going to have 20% CDR. Okay, so that's actually really good. So before, it used to overlap a lot back when your warding item had 10% CDR as well. It used to go over the line fairly often if you got Frozen Heart, but now it's not going to be a waste. And frankly, I had not done the math on this item in a long time to see how efficient it is. It's actually really, really efficient. If you look at just the base number on it, it's 122% efficient without looking at the unique aura. Right? Now, if you compare this to other items out there, so like Zeke's is the one that we'll talk about here in a second a little bit more, but Zeke's is only 102% efficient, and that's actually pretty good compared to the other ones, right? If you start looking at things like Thornmail, that's going to be, I think it's like 80% efficient, 75% efficient on Thornmail. Randuin's is going to end up being 85% efficient. So a lot of these big ticket tank items just are really, really bad in terms of efficiency. And if you're wondering, well, what does efficiency mean? Why is it important? Well, it's basically translates into gold, right? If you have an item that costs you 1,000 gold and it's 100% efficiency, then you're getting 1,000 gold worth of stuff out of that. If it's stats add up to 200% efficiency, then you're getting an extra 1,000 gold off of that, right? So that means that you're pretty much getting an extra triple kill and some change just by buying that item because it's so efficient. So when you have an item like Frozen Heart that can get to 200% efficiency with 122 base plus 14% per champion affected by its aura, then all of a sudden you're getting a lot of extra money, right? If you can get to 200% efficiency off a 2,700 gold item, that's basically 9 kills worth of gold, right? You're getting 300 gold 9 times for 2,700 gold. So it's almost like you get a double penta if you buy this item and you have a team fight with it. So I think that makes it very, very appealing to a lot of champions out there. So what about the straight up comparison versus Zeke's though? Because this is the main reason that Frozen Heart, people stopped getting it. This was a really, really popular item for like the first 5 or 6 years of League, but then it got outshined. A lot of people started getting Zeke's instead, and there have been different variations of Zeke's over time, but the current iteration is not nearly as powerful as people think it is. It's nice, but it's only 102% base efficiency, which we talked about. And then if you add up how much this bonus magic damage is worth, because 1 on-hit bonus damage is worth 25 gold. And if you're looking at 30%, it sounds like, wow, that's a lot of damage, but that's over 2 seconds, right? And it's a debuff that you put on somebody, or it's a dot, rather, that you put on somebody. What it really is 15% on-hit damage that you're actually doing. Because if normally, like, your AD carry is going to keep auto-attacking continuously and reapplying the dot damage. It does not stack, it just reapplies the dot. So it's basically half of the bonus here gets wasted in most situations when you're fighting. Unless you're just like poking somebody every 2 seconds with this, which is just weird. So I don't know why they put it in like that. It's very misleading. It's like those nutrition labels that tell you, oh, this, you know, this candy's only 100 calories. And you look at it a little closer and you're like, wait a minute, there's 3 servings in this candy bar. They expect you to eat a third of a candy bar? What the hell is that? It's actually 300 calories. So anyways, that's kind of how it feels here, right? Where it looks like it's something that's really good. It's like, wow, that's better than I thought. No, it's not. Okay, so every 100 AD that you get then is really only going to translate into 15 on-hit damage, right? So you have 15 times 25 is going to be 375 value, right? Divided by the baseline cost of this item, which is 2250, you're going to get about 17% value. So every 100 AD that your ally has, whenever you activate this, is going to be about 17% efficiency. So in the early game, if you rush this, it's only going to be about 119% efficient in terms of that. And even later on in the game, if they have 200 AD, which is quite a bit, then it's only going to get up to like 136% efficiency. And now this one is a little bit harder to quantify. So you do get more than that. It doesn't just cap out at 137. You can get up to 40 magic damage on hit if you can stick to people. Now, the radius is very small on this, so it's unlikely you're going to hit multiple targets. But if you just think about how typical trading patterns go, you're not going to get a lot of value out of this in a lot of fights. Typically, if you engage with like a Nautilus or a Leona, the person's going to die pretty quickly once you get them, right? So that one person's going to be gone, lights out most of the time, or they're going to flash and dash away from you. Either way, they're not going to just sit there in your storm the vast majority of the time, right? So a lot of this time is going to be wasted. It's like, yeah, it could be 40 damage per second for 10 seconds, 400 damage, which is really good. But realistically, a lot of people are going to disengage, or they're just going to be dead by the time you get any benefit out of that. And especially with someone like Rakan, you don't want to be standing in there in combat most of the time, right? Like, you typically go in, you engage, you hit somebody with your W, and then you get out before you get blown up, right? You're going to be shielding over to your allies and things like that. Yeah, and maybe small skirmishes, little 2v2s and things like that. Maybe you do stay in there and land your autos. But, like, in team fights, you're pretty much going to be getting almost no value out of this a lot of the time, unless you're winning the fight anyways, and you're using the slow just to try to track people down at the end. So it does have value to it, but I don't think it's as much value as people think. And if your AD carry is just like not being very aggressive, or they're just really far behind, they don't have a lot of AD, or you just can't really stick around or can't really use this a lot in early game fights, it's not going to be that great. So if your Ezreal's like 0-3, you're not getting a lot of value out of Zeke's. So, you know, this can get up to, I don't know, maybe 150%, 175% if you're getting a lot of value out of this. So someone like Nautilus and Leona are going to get more value than Rakan out of this, but nevertheless, it's still not going to be a ton of value there. And when you look at the stats, it's okay, but it's just kind of a hodgepodge of stats here. You have this magic resist, the armor, 10% CDR, a little bit of mana. So it's okay. It's like a nice, well-rounded item. Overall, it's a lot better than most other tank items. But I think especially if they have the triple AD comp, Frozen Heart's definitely worth considering. And you got to remember, a lot of tanks love Frozen Heart because typically they can use those cooldowns very efficiently because they're going to have things that are going to be able to force fights. You're going to get a lot of value as soon as your Leona ults up or your Nautilus ults up. Boom, you can just go, right? You can start fights. You can make something happen. Versus if you're playing someone like Janna, you know, CDR is good, but you're not going to be just like spamming your ult every time it's off cooldown, right? It's going to be sitting there up for some length of time, not getting a lot of value out of your CDR. So, all of this is to say, I think Frozen Heart's really undervalued, and there might be a lot more people that check it out. I've been playing it a lot myself. I've been having some pretty good results with it. Now, it's not just the Frozen Heart in a lot of games, why I've been winning a lot lately, but I do think that that's definitely part of it, that I've switched off of Zeke's a lot of times, and I've switched over to Frozen Heart. Now, if you go Frozen Heart as well, getting that much armor does allow you to go for something like Mercs or get a luxury item that's got utility on it, because it's going to cover, like, a lot of tankiness, right? It's almost literally twice the armor of Zeke's. It's pretty close. It's 110 armor. So that means you can get something like a Mikhail's second item, or you can get an Ardent Censor's second item and still be very tanky against mostly AD teams. So it just opens up a lot of other build paths, whereas if you go Zeke's and then you try to go Ardent Censor, you're still going to be too squishy against a lot of ADs, right? Like the Zed's still going to one-shot you. The Twitch is still going to pop up and blow you up out of invisibility. Whatever the case is, it's just not enough. You're going to have to get another defensive item to go with this. And frankly, a lot of the other defensive items just aren't that great on Rakan. Like, I used to get Knight's Vow, but you're only getting half value off of it, and it's just not really that efficient to begin with compared to something like Frozen Heart, right? When you're not considering the passives or actives there, then it's only worth 98%. When you're near your partner, you do get 96%, you get the armor. You do get some extra bonus when you're moving towards people, but in a lot of fights, that's not going to be happening all the time. So really, it's somewhere between 96 and 123% efficiency. You do get some stuff here, but really, it's just really sketchy. It's not going to be as good as something like Frozen Heart. So that's why I like it. It just allows you to get more of those utility items and still feel like you're tanky, still feel like you're not going to get blown up. So I like it quite a bit. Also, the fact that you're not going Presence of Mind anymore on Rakan, having that extra 400 mana is actually very relevant. And especially on Nautilus, we'll talk about Nautilus here in a second, but if you start maxing E again after the Q nerfs on this patch, which is what I'm going to recommend, having that extra mana in fights can actually be a very big deal, because you can yourself pretty quickly spamming E, but it's a very good ability that does a ton of damage, so you want to be able to spam it in team fights. So I think Frozen Heart is definitely something that people should explore a lot more, and I've really been very surprised with just how powerful that item is. And don't forget, the aura is huge on this thing. They nerfed most of the other aura items in the game. Like, they nerfed Sona's aura so that you have to be super close to her. They got rid of Abyssal Scepter and substituted it for Abyssal Mask. They nerfed that aura so that it's only like 350 range. So there's a lot of things that they have nerfed in terms of auras, but they did not nerf Frozen Heart's aura. It still is a massive, massive aura. So it's working at 700 range. That's huge. It's so easy to be within 700 range of at least like 3 people in a team fight, right? Which would give this 52, so 174% efficiency. And realistically, in a lot of fights, you're going to be near all 5 people, which is over 200%. So I think that's a very big deal. And Frozen Heart just works, right? Like, Zeke's is going to be on cooldown sometimes, right? Whenever your ult's on cooldown, Zeke's is on cooldown, and it loses a ton of its value. And sometimes you're just going to have to engage and fight on someone where Zeke's is not that good. Maybe you're roaming mid lane to make a play with your Syndra. You need to activate your Zeke's just because you're going to use your ult anyways. Why not? But she's not getting a lot of value out of those auto attacks because she doesn't have a lot of AD. So there's just, Zeke's is very conditional to get a lot of the value out of it, versus Frozen Heart just works all the time. It's always going to be giving you value. So I've been very pleased with how that's gone. So that's my case for Frozen Heart. That's really informing how I'm building out the tier list now, and I highly recommend that people try this out. I don't think a lot of other people are going to be talking about this, and I think it's huge. Now, will you see it in pro play? Probably not as much. Maybe. I mean, 2,700 is kind of in between. Like, it's definitely on the expensive side for support, but at the same time, it's not quite as much as some of the bigger ticket items that are like 2,900 gold or 3,000 gold. So it's kind of in between. But I think in solo queue, you can afford it. Glacial Shroud is a really powerful early game item. It's great. It's one of the best items you can get pound for pound, cost for cost in the early game. And then getting Double Cloth is actually pretty nice too, because that allows you to tank tower shots early. If you need to do some dives at level 6 or whatever, you got a Glacial Shroud plus Cloth Armor, you can definitely take some hits before you do it. You don't have to waste time getting like this stupid the new Aegis of the Legion or whatever Just feels terrible when you have to get this item. Because it doesn't, like, have anything special about it. It's just straight, like, 30 armor, 30 magic resist. It's super generic. It just feels awful. Especially having to get that null magic mantle when the enemy team has so much AD. It's not helping you dive towers early. It just feels bad. Versus, you know, being able to go glacial into frozen. You're getting the double cloth armor, which is great. And then that Warden's Mail really adds a lot of extra protection, too, against the AD carry, who's going to be potentially trying to auto-attack you down. So, I think ultimately it does have nice components. The 800 to complete it is what's really annoying. Like, getting the cloth armors into Warden Mail is definitely doable. All of these components are 400 gold or less, so that's really friendly on your back timings. But the Frozen Heart, the 800, does kind of suck. So, you got to save up for that a little bit. So you might have to go for a back where you just get some wards and just hang on to like 500 gold and wait for next time. So that is a feels bad, but especially if you're behind in the game. But I think it's worth it. It's a really good item. And it's the fastest way that you can get to 20% CDR without just getting components. So yes, you can get like a Kindle Gem and a Glacial Shroud and get to 20%, but it's going to slow down your item completions, and you want to try to complete items because a lot of times the most powerful parts of items are going to be the passives or the actives that you get with the completed item, right? So you don't just want to be sitting on components most of the time. And this is going to be the fastest way you can get to 20 by actually completing items. You know, even if you go like Shirelias, you rush like Shirelias on Rakan for some reason, and then after that you go Forbidden Idol. That's still going to be 2850 by the time you get to the 10% CDR, versus this is only 2700. So it's the fastest way without just splitting up different components to get to 20% CDR, which is really nice. That means you can be casting more ults, making more proactive plays, trying to snowball the game even harder. Off of champions that can use it, which are most of the popular champions right now. Most of the tanks, the engaged champs. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So yeah, I just wanted to explain that because I don't think you're going to hear that from any other content creator. They're not going to break it down. I think I'm ahead of the curve on this. I was ahead of the curve on the triple crit cloak too. If people listen to me back in November when they changed crit cloak, I said, man, that could be really strong if someone just went like Infinity Edge triple crit cloak. You know, a month and a half later, some Koreans started doing it. All of a sudden, it's OP. Recommended Soraka. Hey, I think Soraka's really OP in the preseason. Ended up getting up to the highest win rate, around 54% in the preseason. People could have got some free low if they did that. So I think this is going to be the next big thing that a lot of people aren't talking about. Okay. So I think Rakan's number one right now. You know, I've obviously had a lot of success with him. But even outside of that, just on a theoretical perspective, I think he's almost always going to be a really strong pick. There's just so much in this guy's kit, and a lot of people, if you just haven't played a lot of Rakan, it's not going to be intuitive to you, like what makes him so strong. I mean, he's just good in almost every situation you can draw up. Because he has one of the premier engage tools in the game with his ult plus Grand Entrance. So Grand Entrance, it doesn't have the same kind of range on paper that something like a Nautilus hook is going to have, or a Pike hook, a Blitz hook, whatever. It's like, oh, it's only 600 range. But you got to remember that you can close gaps onto your allies with Battle Dance as well. So if you E over to an ally for 700, like let's say your jungler is going to gank somebody, you E over for 700, and then you W in, that's 1300 engage range. And the fact that you can E twice to a couple of different allies to catch up to fights is really going to give you up to a maximum of 2000 engage range, which is really huge. So it's very deceptive, like what people think his range is. He's extremely mobile. His ultimate also, there's a really high probability that you can hit multiple targets with this. Usually you can get 2 or 3 different targets. So that's really handy. And just the fact this is a free dash too, almost no supports have that are mainstream, where you can just jump anytime, anywhere with this. So that allows you to get really deep wards in the enemy jungle, because if anyone ever tries to catch up to you, most of the time you can just W over a wall and get away. So it also allows you to try to make rotations that could otherwise be risky for some champions, because if you get cut off by the jungle or somebody else, you can probably still escape with your W. So he's just one of the most mobile and one of the safest supports, who also simultaneously is one of the best hard engaged supports out there as well. So that makes him extremely versatile in a lot of situations. And he has one of the best shields in the game as well, because don't forget, you can cast this twice. So that's basically a 280 shield with a 1.6 AP ratio. So he scales extremely well with AP. And that's something that Leona and Nautilus just don't do. Right? They do have some AP ratios, but they don't have the same kind of shield as us. So not only are you super mobile and safe yourself, and you have really good engage, but you can also protect your allies, not just through CC, but through a raw shield that you can throw on them, which is very, very strong. So that opens up a lot of build paths other hard engage tank type of champions just aren't going to have. Being able to get things like Ardent Sensor, being able to get things like a Mikhail's and benefit from that plus 20% healing and shielding. So that gives him one of the most versatile item builds in the game. You can get almost any item as support that's a mainstream support item in different situations, and it can probably be useful. When you have a champion that can comfortably build something like Frozen Heart or Zeke's and can also build things like Ardent Sensor and Mikhail's or Shirelia's and still be powerful, that's a really good mix there. So the only knock to Rakan really is that his Q isn't that great in the laning phase. It does provide like a little bit of poke and a little bit of healing, so his Q, not the most amazing spell in the world. But his W, his E, and his ult are awesome. And he deceptively has one of the highest effective health pools over time in the game. Or at least in the bot lane as well. Because the shield comes up every now and then, which is a pretty big boon to him. It has a 0.9 ratio on it. And it shows up usually every 30 seconds or so. So it's kind of like you're gaining, somewhere around 70 or 80 HP every 30 seconds whenever this shield comes up. So it makes him surprisingly really resilient to poke and pretty good during light trades, especially when you think of that shield combined with Guardian. Gives you some great windows to go in for light trades and just win wars of attrition against a lot of other champions out there that don't have really strong heals like a Soraka or something like that. So I think that makes him really strong. So I recommend Guardian, Demolish, Conditioning, Unflinching. I have seen some other Rakans. You can go Revitalize if you know that you want to get something like a Redemption, like a Mikhail's. Maybe they have a ton of CC on their team, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go Frozen Heart into Mikhail's. Maybe you can go Revitalize to kind of double down on that extra healing that you're going to get. So that could be useful. Unflinching is great if they have a lot of pieces of CC. And I have seen some top-end Rakans even get the health one. I've tried it. I wasn't too impressed with it. Overgrowth, but maybe there are some situations where it could be useful. Either way, you have several options there. And then I really like the Ghost Poro plus Ulti Hunter. I think a lot of people really disrespect Ghost Poro because the Poro itself is not insane. It doesn't give you a huge amount of vision, but it does give you some vision, and it basically extends the length of your early game wards, which I think is pretty huge, because if you're putting your wards on their camps, which you can do that comfortably with Rakan a lot of times, because remember, you can escape so easily with your W, so you can afford to go in deep and ward their camps instead of getting those little shallow river wards. And they're going to have to check those camps at some point, right? And Ghost Poro is going to be sitting there waiting on them. So it basically does end up extending your wards for an extra 60 seconds, especially in the early game, which is massive when you're very limited on wards until about 9 or 10 minutes once you complete your ward item. It helps you protect Dragon, keep an eye on that, helps you track where they are, which camps they're doing. So it's really, really nice. And, around 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how often they walk across those Poros, you're going to get a free 30 AP, which is going to be worth over 600 gold. So it's a super valuable rune. If you think about boots, the free boots that you get are worth about 350 gold, which a lot of 80 carries get off of magical footwear. And that's about a 350 gold value that often doesn't activate until 10 minutes, right? Versus this, you're getting a 600 gold value around sometime between 15 to 20 minutes. So it's a similar gold value to free boots, but it actually also does something in the early game. The free boots literally do nothing until you get the boots. Ghost Poro gives you a lot of extra vision, which is awesome, like I said, when you can place it deep wards on their camps, especially in the early game. So I think that's something that a lot of people disrespect, that is very good on champions that can get good vision and also can really leverage that extra AP that they get. And Ulti Hunter. I think this is one of the most criminally underused runes out there. I mean, 25 up to 25% extra CDR on your ult is a very big deal on champions that have hard engaged, like highly effective ults. So like Rakan, like potentially Nautilus, there are several champions out there that can use that really well. So, you know, a lot of people are just like, oh, CDR is an overvalued stat, or this only affects your ult and whatever. But on certain champions, this is very good. Was the old Presence of Mind plus Legend Tenacity better than Ulti Hunter Ghost Poro? Probably, but you know what? That just doesn't exist anymore, right? Presence of Mind has changed dramatically and doesn't affect your ult timers anymore. So I think this is the new Presence of Mind. I think it's a great build. Some people on Rakan will still get things like Presence of Mind for the mana, so you don't have to get a mana item. You know, if they don't want to do Frozen Heart, if they want to get Ardent Sensor Rush or something like that that's not going to have a lot of mana regen on it, I guess you could consider it. Some people I've seen doing Triumph plus Legend Tenacity as well. I will say one thing about the Tenacity stuff is that after a certain amount of time, the Tenacity really loses a lot of its value, especially against things like Nautilus and Leona, because they don't have really long like pieces of CC, but they have very small chunks of CC, right? Like Nautilus's auto attack, his hook, and a lot of that stuff is not affected very much by Tenacity, right? So, and a lot of Nautilus is his knock-up too on his ult, and that's not affected at all by Tenacity. So a lot of his stuff are just like these little chip damages of CC that aren't affected, because you always, like every piece of CC, the minimum amount is half a second. So if Nautilus is hitting you, you know, with his auto attack to CC you for 0.75 seconds, and you have, you know, 50% tenacity, it's still only going to reduce it down to 0.15 seconds. The same is true with Leona for the most part, right? That you have her E, where you're getting pulled in. That's not going to be affected by tenacity at all. You have her, like her empowered Q attack is like 1 second. It might be 1.25. Then you have her ult, which is, I think, 1.5 seconds. So there's just so many little pieces of chip CC that getting too much tenacity could be a waste of a stat that you could be using on something else. So when you're taking like unflinching plus legend tenacity, it can be rough. You can just go Mercury Treads plus unflinching, and that's probably good enough to get you there, right? Like, you really don't need much more than 50% tenacity to be effective. Now, yes, that means you're not getting Moby Boots if you do that build, but you are still getting some magic resist off of Mercury Treads as well, and it does open you up to take something like Ulti Hunter and Ghost Poro and get a lot more value out of it. So, like, Triumph, I don't know. A lot of the pro players are very smart. Obviously, you know, they're great players, and that's what a lot of them are doing right now. Where is old Rakan? Is he up here? By the way, 7-0 in LPL. So 100% in the first week with Rakan here. But yeah, that's what a lot of people are doing here. I believe that's the most common. Where's it? Show all the runes. I don't know if it's going to show them all here, but that's what I've seen the most on u.gg is a lot of people are still getting that. I think a lot of people just really haven't tried out Ghost Poro as much. I mean, I guess in pro, you got to think people are going to be sweeping wards a lot more out of their jungle. They're going to be using control wards, so you're not going to be able to get those Poros up as fast. Maybe that's the reasoning behind it. I don't know. But in solo queue, I still think that the Ghost Poro plus Ulti Hunter is going to be good. So Relic Shield, I think, is still the way you want to go. Some people have tried going Frostfang. As you can see, most pros are still going Relic Shield. It's just a lot easier to get that triggered, to get that stacked up. You don't have to worry about forcing trades just to get stacks. And then Frozen Heart or Zeke's after that. And then I like either Shrelia's or Redemption. This is a nice combo because they have the exact same build path. So it's just Forbidden Idol plus Crystalline Bracer. So you can build both of those and then just, you know, kind of buy time for 5-10 minutes and figure out which item do you need after that. So I think that's pretty solid. And then you can get Ardent Sensor if someone like your AD carry is just really fed and they're really far ahead. So you have different versatility there with your builds. Okay, and then Nautilus I still think is going to be good. Now, yes, he did get nerfed on this patch in terms of his Q. If you do max out Q, you are going to be losing 30 damage. But if you don't max Q, you're only losing 10 damage in the early game. And I know a lot of people have been maxing Q. I just think that's incorrect on Nautilus for a few different reasons. Now, obviously, once again, there are very smart people that are maxing Q. But his E is so powerful. And historically, that's what people have been maxing. And I think that people just got baited by some of the buffs to Dredgeline to want to get it. But, like, look at this thing right here. It ends up doing up to 350 damage if this is max in a team fight to each person that it hits. And it has 600 radius. So that's a pretty good radius. And that is a hell of a lot of damage, base damage. 350? That's a lot of damage. So it does a ton of damage in team fights, even single target, even in like small skirmishes, just like little 2v2s. That's a lot of damage. It's only on a 5-second cooldown too, so you can spam that. It does full damage to minions, so it allows you to wave clear really quickly, which, you know, if someone else is nearby, you're not going to be last hitting that, but you can still set that up, right? You can still use your Riptide to get the backline low, so your Caitlyn can just throw a Q right through it, clear it out almost instantly, right? Or sometimes you might have to hold a lane by yourself, or you might be trying to push and just no one else is there, and you just need to push a lane out. He's really good at pushing it. He's very good at taking scuttles. You know, if you find an opportunity to take a scuttle, you can do that. So I just think it's such a versatile ability that just, once again, cranks out a ton of damage. It cranks out a big slow. It's a low cooldown. It's wave clear. It's just everything that Nautilus wants. And what is Dredgeline, right? So it does more damage. Single target damage of 250 if you hit somebody with it, right? And it's still going to be on a 10-second cooldown. Versus this is a 5-second cooldown for 350 damage. Like, this is, like, more than 50% damage than this. And it's multi-target in fights a lot of times. Now, you might be saying, okay, well, this is how you actually start the fight, is Dredgeline, right? You got to have your cooldown so that you can throw more hooks. It's like, yeah, but Nautilus doesn't have to do that. He's not Blitzcrank. He has other abilities, right? He can just press R on them with depth charge. Boom, fight started. Like, you don't have to start the fight with a hook. It's nice if you hit it. Sure. But you can still use a depth charge on someone from 825 range, and then once they get hit with that, you're 100% going to hit that hook, right? Unless they, you know, have hourglass or something like that. If you hit them with the depth charge, it's a free hit on the hook, right? So I don't think he's as reliant on fishing for hooks as someone like Thresh or Pike or Blitz or a lot of these other champs, because he has another really solid engage with his depth charge. So I think that leaves a lot of room to max out Riptide, especially if you're going to go for Frozen Heart, which I highly recommend on him to get more mana so you can spam more Riptides in fights. So I think that you can still max Riptide, it's not going to matter as much. This could actually be really good for you if you are a Nautilus lover, because now maybe people will think he's bad and they'll stop banning him so you can actually play him in games. So we'll see how it goes, but I still think he's going to be really solid. He's in a great place. Excellent matchup against Thresh, who's the most popular pick right now. And the big reason for that is he just has way more CC than Thresh does. He puts up way more damage in team fights. He's just a better version of Thresh in a lot of circumstances. Now, Thresh does have more defensive tools. He does have Flay. He does have Lantern to help out. So Thresh is still going to be really good. We'll talk about Thresh here in a second. But in terms of just like reliability, just point click, get a lot of value, Nautilus is still going to be quite strong. So, you know, I do think that obviously the nerf matters a little bit. It's going to hurt him, but ultimately it could be useful for you in solo queue if he's banned less. Now that you can actually play him. So you just want to go Aftershock, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Unflinching, and then Ghost Poro and Ulti Hunter. Now, I like Font of Life because that does open up an Ardent Sensor build on him. And if you do go Frozen Heart, you might actually have enough armor to where you can afford to splurge on something like Ardent Sensor. Now, Ardent is something that seems kind of troll on him, and in the past, I've mentioned it several times, but I've said, usually you're just not going to be tanky enough. Well, if they have a triple AD comp and you get Frozen Heart, you just might be tanky enough to pull it off. So Ardent Sensor is deceptively, potentially pretty good on him. He does have AP ratios that are okay. You know, his ult's going to have a 0.8 ratio on it. His hook has a 0.9. Even if you don't put extra points in it, it still always has a 0.9, even if you only have 1 point in it. And then his Riptide is going to have a 0.6, which is not terrible. So, okay, not insane AP, but it's all right. But the big kicker with that is this Riptide applies a slow to every single person hit. If you have Font of Life, that's going to trigger a Font of Life debuff on them. If one of your allies attacks one of those people with the Font of Life debuff, they get a heal. That heal counts as coming from you, which triggers Ardent Sensor. So whenever you start a fight with your hook or your ult, and then you use Riptide, anytime anyone auto attacks anyone who's been hit by any of your stuff, including your Riptide, they're going to get the Ardent Sensor buff. So that means you can get massive, massive value. And Ardent Sensor, for people who don't know, is just like the ultimate like efficiency item. Like the only thing in the game that's going to be more efficient than Ardent Sensor is Redemption, and that's only if you hit like everyone on your team with Redemption and get like maximum value out of it, which is extremely rare. Versus Ardent Sensor just working. I mean, it's so powerful. It's one of the only items that is like has an entire name after it for an entire season, just about the Ardent Sensor meta, right? Very few other support items have ever had the honor of being called the X meta other than Ardent Sensor. And that's just because the value on this thing is just nutty, right? We were talking about value earlier in the game. Baseline value is 118% without any of its passives. If you just one person at level 1 triggers the passive, you go to 150% efficiency. If it's like you're level 9 or level 10, it's already pushing 190 to 200% with just one person active. If everyone on your team gets this activated and you are at least like level 10, you're going to be pushing 250 to 300% efficiency on an item. That is insane on this item, right? That's 4,600 extra gold if you get to 300% efficiency. That is like just an unfathomable amount of gold just about. I mean, it's basically like you're going to be getting like 14 or 15 kills or something worth of gold off of getting this item. So the problem, of course, is you are going to be squishy. It has no defensive stats whatsoever on it. So on someone who's going to be going in and getting hit a lot like Nautilus, it's definitely a risky proposition. But you're getting so much value out of Frozen Heart potentially against triple AD comps. I mean, literally, Frozen Heart has almost twice the armor of Zeke's on it. It's very close. So it's almost like you have two defensive items in one. So I think that might be a really good new combination. Nautilus, Rush Frozen Heart, then Ardent Sensor. If you have, at least two people on your team that benefit from auto attacks, it could be really good. So you don't have to do that, but that is on the table. And no other champions, very few other tanks have the option of doing something like that. It's very unique to Nautilus because he has okay AP ratios and he has an AoE slow that's spammable. So that's on the table. But you could also just go more traditional items, right? You could go for, Frozen Heart into like either Righteous Glory or Frozen Heart into like Knight's Vow or something like that, and you could still get some pretty good value out of it. But anyways, I think Nautilus is really good. So it's a nerf, but it's really just a slap on the wrist if you're doing the build that I think ultimately will be strongest. You typically don't want to go Frozen Heart and Zeke's because you're kind of overkilling the mana at that point. You may not need that much mana. Although I'm not sure if that's terrible on someone like Nautilus who can really like crank through that mana quickly. Because spamming that E will eat a lot of mana. So maybe going both of those items against a heavy AD comp, maybe that is actually viable. We'll see. Okay, Leona. I think Leona might become the most popular. I think she is the most popular right now in the LPL supports, and that's going to catch a lot of people's attention if that also happens in LCS in Europe over the next couple of weeks. So she didn't have an amazing win rate, but she was the most played. Braum was more effective. Although he was only picked in 2 less games, they're very, very close. It's just Braum was 9% higher win rate. But Leona's just much better in solo queue most of the time than Braum. Braum's like good with Lucian, but Leona's still gonna be good. Ton of CC. That buff to her W last season to where it makes her really good against small chip damage. is really nice, where you get like a flat damage reduction, makes her very good against auto attacks early on. The nerf to Aftershock in the early game does hurt her for some all-ins, but she's still really good. Her ultimate only has a 90-second cooldown, so you can really make some proactive plays and fish for some kills with her. She's super oppressive if you get ahead. The only reason I have her a little bit lower is that she doesn't have as many defensive options, and you have to go all the way in with her. So you're going like from you all the way over to them, versus Nautilus meets you halfway in the middle. Thresh sort of pulls them halfway towards you, and he doesn't have to go anywhere. So it's just a lot more dangerous. You could pull yourself under tower. You could put yourself out of position, make yourself vulnerable to ganks. So I think that she is a little bit more risky, but she still does have a lot of CC, and she has really low cooldowns on her CC. So like her Q is only going to be like a 5-second cooldown. Her E, once you max that out, gets down to like 5 or 6 second cooldown. So she did get buffed a lot last season to make her more viable. And she's kind of the queen of low cooldown, like very sticky, just chain CC, right? So you can get that down to 6 seconds. And her Q is on a 5-second cooldown. So, and then her ultimate's on a 90-second cooldown at level 1. So she's just very, very sticky. It's almost impossible to get away from her. She's always hitting her E. And it's a lot of just chain CC. And she is pretty tanky as well with Eclipse. This obviously has good synergy with Aftershock. Even with the nerfs, it's still going to be really good. And I do think that Frozen Heart can be really awesome on her as well. She does have low baseline cooldowns, but she also gets a lot of extra value out of that armor because the scaling on her W does scale with armor as well. And Aftershock also scales with armor. So, you know, against an all AD team, stacking a ton of armor up like that really gets a ton of extra bonus with her. So I still think she's going to be really strong. She doesn't have great AP ratios. Like, it's okay. She does have a 0.8 on her ult, just like Nautilus does. So that's handy, but like her other stuff doesn't have as much. She really can't do kind of cute builds like Ardent Sensor on her. Also, Nautilus, the plus healing and shielding does affect his own shield on his W, so you do get value out of that plus healing and shielding. Versus Leona doesn't have any self shields, so it's not really gonna affect you that much. You really can't go the Ardent Sensor on her that much. So it's fine. You can still go Ardent or like Frozen Heart into Zeke's against heavy AD comps, and she can still be effective. And then I think you just want to go Triumph and Tenacity on her. The main reason is because she's not going to get a lot of value out of the AP that you get on Ghost Poro. So that doesn't allow you to go Ulti Hunter, Ghost Poro, and but Triumph and Tenacity is still really good. So yeah, I think that she's still going to be a very strong support on this patch. Okay, Nami has really risen to prominence over the last patch or so. I didn't think that the change was going to be that significant, but statistically it was quite significant. She ended up gaining 2 or 3% overall, and her pick rate did go up quite a bit. So she's now at 14% pick rate, so that's the biggest enchanter by far, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's not even close. She's one of the most picked overall. I think there's like Thresh. Yeah, she's the 4th most picked overall. So you have like your Thresh, your Leona, and your Nautilus, but then you have her. And she has a much higher win rate than they do. So the E, it makes it a lot easier to trigger it off of abilities now. So it's not like extra damage per se in a lot of cases, but it just is damage that comes out a lot faster, right? Where you don't have to wait on those auto attacks. It's just a little bit more burst damage. And then she's just got a nice kit. She has good point-click harassment with her W in the laning phase. She still has really nice CC with her wave, with her Q, and she's really good at disengaging like a Leona or a Nautilus. So if Nautilus like presses his ult to engage on your ADC, you can just throw a wave at him, and it's going to be really hard for the enemy team to get through that wave. They're going to have to try to walk around it. So she just have really solid disengage. Not quite as good as someone like Janna in terms of disengage, but still pretty dang good. And she has that combination of really good harassment early on and that extra piece of really nice, potentially multi-target CC with your bubble in team fights. So I still think she's going to be really solid. If someone does get a hold of her, you know, if Nautilus hooks her, Leona hooks her, there's a high probability she's going to die if she doesn't have flash. But nevertheless, she's still going to be a strong champ. Now, Thresh is someone that, and I am going to go a little bit faster here because I don't want this to take too long. Thresh is someone that I'm moving up quite a bit just because I think he synergizes super well historically with Frozen Heart. And I do think that Frozen Heart, as I've said numerous times, is going to be a really big player on this patch. But most people know like what's up with Thresh, but CDR is exceptionally strong on him because of the way that his Q scales. Because it's a flat reduction every time you hit somebody with a hook. So the lower the base reduction is, the more value you get out of that flat reduction. So for example, if it's a 20-second cooldown early on, you land your hook, it's only going to reduce it down to 17, right? But if you get the hook down to like a 7-second cooldown, then it's going to go down to 4 seconds total cooldown. So you're getting a lot of extra value out of that. And pretty much if you get to 40% CDR and you're consistently hitting hooks in fights, then it feels like hook is just pretty much always going to be up. So he really, really likes the CDR. The 20% off of Frozen Heart is going to be great. Being able to stack that armor up is a godsend because he has really low base armor early on in the game. It gets to be pretty decent later once he collects a lot of souls, which can be pretty good. And then that attack speed slow is really, really nice as well because that means that he's going to be able to safely go in there with his Q, disrupt, use his ult, use his flay, lantern people in. So it's just going to give him more freedom to go in and do the things that he wants to do when he has that much armor, particularly against a triple AD team. So I think it's very handy on him. Also, a lot of the other items, like the other tank items, are just pretty bad on him, to be honest. Like, he's considered ranged, so you don't get much value out of Knight's Vow. Just like with Rakan, it just feels really awkward to get that item on him. And then even something like Zeke's is not insanely great on him because you're not really using your ult proactively a lot of times, if that makes sense. Like, you're not starting fights with it. So if you do land your hook, then you obviously will want to use it. But it's just a little more conditional than like Nautilus, where just someone's in range, you press R, you start the fight, or like Rakan, you know, really high probability you can start a fight with your R plus W. With the box, it's a little bit more conditional. It's on a longer cooldown, 140 seconds, and you know, you just may not use it all the time when it's off cooldown. So that means that Zeke's kind of doesn't have quite as much value. Also, you have a really big slow with your box anyway, so you're not getting a lot of value out of the slow on Zeke's because they're already going to be slowed by 99%. So, you know, people get Zeke's on him a decent chunk, but I don't... It's like you don't want to, but you kind of have to because other items aren't that good. And so a lot of times you'll find Thresh is getting things like Redemption, which is like okay for team fights, but that just pretty much says like, okay, there just aren't many good items. I'm just going to get a team fight item. Like, that's what it feels like. But with the return of Frozen Heart, potentially, that's actually historically, like I said, an extremely good item on him. So now he finally has a good item that he can build, and so I think that's going to help him a lot. Because he was already pretty popular, even when his items were terrible, and now he could have a little bit more of a choice. Now, I don't know... I didn't see if a lot of top-end Threshes have switched over to Guardian or if they're staying with Aftershock. I see mostly Aftershock on him early on. I think that's probably where a lot of people are going. I do think that Guardian could be useful in some circumstances, but see, a lot of people are just going like either Zeke's, Knight's Vow, which just feels bad. You know, Redemption, Locket. See people getting... Shoulder guards might be okay in the early game. I still feel like Relic Shield is going to be better later because he does have some AP ratios. Like, it's not... I don't know. It's not that great. You do have 100% on your ult, which is pretty nice. You do have 50% on your Q, so it's not the 90% that Nautilus has, but... Anyways, what are some of the pros doing? It's pretty much everybody just Aftershock. Yeah, there's a couple of people that are trying around with Guardian, but it's pretty much going to be Aftershock on him. And yeah, you can't really go Ghost Poro plus Ulti Hunter. So a lot of people just end up going something like Stopwatch into... A lot of times I'll see like Cosmic Biscuits, but you can also go Stopwatch if you want to, or even Hex Flash can be good in some circumstances. So he does have some options. More and more people are trying out Gargoyle's Stoneplate. You know, that does allow you to get Stopwatch and get some value out of it by turning it into an item later on. The problem is it has no CDR on it, and he really, really likes CDR, so I don't know. And if you're going Stoneplate, like, you might as well just go ahead and get Frozen Heart. It's only 200 more gold. It's got 20% CDR. It's a lot better. So I don't know. I'll have to try out the Gargoyle and see, but to me, that item just doesn't feel that great. Unless they have a perfectly balanced damage comp where you need a lot of magic resist and a lot of armor, it just feels like you're not going to be getting great value off of that item. Like, what is he against? I mean, obviously, Hako's a great Thresh player. Yeah, I mean, like, who is their, where's the AD threat coming from on their team? Right? Like, they have a Talia bot lane, Echo mid, and then, like, Jax top. I mean, I guess Jax is going to have some AD as well, but, like, Frozen Heart would still be pretty good. Like, it's great against Jax. It's great against, Lee. Well, I guess, maybe that's an instance where it's not going to be that great, but I don't know. Neither one of these items is going to be that solid. I think in perhaps that situation, but that's kind of a weird setup there. Versus, like, let's see Ben here, what he's up against. So, like, this one is a more typical solo queue comp that I've been describing, right? Where you have, like, one mid laner who does damage, then you have a top laner who's AD, a jungler who's AD, and a traditional AD carry. Like, you don't need the magic resist as much here, right? Especially this Fizz is 1 in 6. Like, you're just not getting that much value out of that 40 magic resist on Gargoyle Stoneplate, I don't think. So it's like, why not just go Frozen Heart here, you know? I think a lot of people just aren't even thinking about it. Most people just forgot that item existed. So, I don't know. I think it will be good with Thresh. Thresh does have a good matchup against Leona. I think his matchup against Rakan is, like, okay. If you play him really well, you have to be able to flay the W back. But I think that he does have a lot of potential in a lot of matchups. The Nautilus matchup's not great for him, but most other matchups are going to be pretty solid. So, if you're good on Thresh, I think this is a great time for Thresh if you want to try out that Frozen Heart build a little bit more. Okay, so some of the tier 2s, we'll just flip through these a little bit faster. Zyra, I think, is still going to be pretty solid, particularly if you're gold and lower. She's just going to be your premier AP champion. She just has very consistent poke with her plants in lane. They do a ton of base damage, and she can still, like, harass with her Q and have threat available with her E. So that makes her kind of unique in that instance. I guess Brand can do that too. He can harass with his W, but then still hold on to his E plus Q just in case you get counter engaged. So they both kind of have that going for them. The reason that I like Zyra a little bit more is I just think that she just has a little bit more consistent poke with her plants. The fact that it's not just hitting your Q, but it also, has the plants to go with it. And that she has really good vision control, too, for an AP champion. So you can spawn plants in bushes and, fight over pink wards easily, or not even have to use your wards. You can, spawn a plant in a nearby bush and then walk out further and extend your ward line. So I think that's very useful. And then in team fights, I think it's just a lot easier to get a lot of multi-target CCs. You can get a knock-up on 2 or 3 people pretty comfortably in a lot of team fights. It's a huge radius on your R. Versus Brand is really only going to be able to stun one person. Now, Brand does do a ton of damage to if they have a lot of melee. So if they have like 3 or 4 melee on their team and everyone's going to be grouped up for a team fight, a Brand ult does do a lot of damage and doesn't require as much prep as a Zyra ult. You don't have to put the plants down. And land your E, you can just kind of press R, and it's just going to do a ton of damage. Now, Brand does get stuffed by more things, though. So, like, Yasuo's Wind Wall completely crushes his ultimate. So does a Braum shield. Versus Zyra gets around both of those because her ult's still going to go off. And if you're spawning melee plants, then neither one of those champions is going to do anything to mitigate the damage of the melee plants on their targets. So, I think Zyra's a little bit more flexible, but both of them can be pretty good. The main thing that holds them back is that their items are just really expensive. You can get the Sork boots, and you can get Oblivion Orb early for a nice, power spike in the first, 10 to 15 minutes of the game. But after that, trying to get into Leandries or even getting Morello can feel like it's just really expensive while you're waiting on those blasting wands and completing, like 650 gold completion items and stuff like that. So unless you're really far ahead, it's not going to be that great. However, I think she is a good option if you do have that triple AD or even quad AD on your team. If literally everyone's AD and you need one AP threat, Zyra's obviously going to be a good option. But even if you do have triple AD, sometimes if your mid laner who's the AP is not playing something that has a ton of AP, like maybe an Orianna who can put out some damage, but is also kind of a utility champ, Zyra can help push you over the line and make people respect the magic resist a bit more so you can punish them if everyone buys ninja tabbies on the enemy team. So I think she's one of the best AP options, especially if you really need AP for your team comp. So Janna's another one that I have here. Now, Janna and Soraka did fall off quite a bit in the preseason, and that really caught me off guard. On 10.1, I still had them both ranked really highly because they were so good in the preseason. And I'm not entirely sure what happened there. I think a big part of it is there's just so much chaos in the preseason. Games just can be a lot more lopsided. You have people coming in trying to play that haven't played in months versus people that played during the entire preseason. And so I feel like deaths, I think I actually looked at this, and deaths weren't up that much overall. Game times were about the same, maybe slightly faster. But either way, it just feels like there's a lot more snowball potential in the game, and if you can play a proactive champion like Rakan or Nautilus or Leona, then you can hard punish people and just take over the game as support. Versus Janna and Soraka are just like a lot better when teams are more evenly matched, when it's just like a close war of attrition and you're having like good organized team fights. That's when Soraka and Janna are going to shine. And especially if there are tanks in the meta. There really aren't a lot of tanks right now. I was hoping that there would be more tanks that would come in, but really just nobody's playing tanks. Tanks do have a pretty high win rate in the jungle role. So if you look here in the jungle, if you're looking at win rates, there are several tanks that are pretty good, like Warwick, Nunu, Volibear are all pretty solid. Zack's kind of up there. But when you look at pick rate, people just aren't playing them, right? People are playing things like Lee Sin, Echo, Elise, Jarvan, usually heavy AD Jarvan, Master Yi, Kha'Zix, Kayn, Olaf. You're just not getting as much value there. And the same thing is top lane. A lot of people aren't playing tanks. Now, Set and Darius are tank-like, so you do get some value out of that, but you really want tanks to be more prominent in the meta if you're going to be playing something like Soraka and Janna, because the plus healing and shielding just scales way, way better if your team has more resistances. Also, if they don't die in 0.1 seconds to an assassin, that's helpful too. So, I don't know. Those champions are pretty good, but it's not just a feeling that I have about it. Statistically, they dropped a lot in the baseline of the season. So that's just my understanding of it. I mean, both of these were pushing 54% for most of the preseason. So they lost, 2.5%, which is a lot, and neither one of them got directly nerfed. So, anyways, I think Janna, of those two, Janna's going to have more consistent early game pressure if you do go for Scorch or Comet, get 3 points in W, and then you can even go something like Cheap Shot early on or Relentless Hunter. She can put up some pretty decent poke in the early game, and she's going to have way better peel overall against hard engage comps. So she's going to have much better game against things like a Leona, like a Nautilus. It's going to be much more of a skill-based matchup. Versus someone like Soraka does scale a lot harder in team fights, I think, overall. If she's left unchecked, she can just completely take over the game by herself. But she doesn't have nearly as much peel. She's going to be a lot more vulnerable to all-in, and she's a lot more vulnerable to Grievous Wounds. Grievous Wounds are pretty good against Janna, too, but her shield's not going to be affected by those. And she also adds on AD to her shield, so that's additional value that's not going to be affected by Grievous Wounds. Versus pretty much everything in Soraka's kit is going to be hit pretty hard by Grievous Wounds. So I do think that Soraka can power through it. She can still be really strong in the right comps, but given the chaotic nature of the beginning of the season here, I feel like she's decidedly tier 2. I mean, maybe she's sneaking in later tier 1. So she's still good. She's not as good as she was because of a lot of the skill gaps that are going on right now. Blitzcrank also going to be very strong, and you know he's very good against these enchanters like Nami, like Soraka, like Janna. You know those aren't the most powerful or like the most popular picks in the world. Although Nami is very popular, as we just saw, but like Janna, Soraka, a little bit less so. He's not amazing in a Nautilus and Leona. He's okay, but you know those champions going to have way more CC than he does. Where he kind of shines is just in the chaos, just being able to roam around, try to land your hooks, make plays off of that. So just if you can just exploit that a lot of people are going to be rusty, they're not going to respect the danger of their positioning and things like that a lot more, then you can see why Blitzcrank's going to be really strong. He has the most burst damage of any of the hook supports. So if you do land that hook, they're probably going to die because your ult and your hook itself have just such a huge amount of base damage that I think that's going to make him very strong. So he still is pretty good. I would just overall prefer the Nautilus and the Leona if you want one of those engaged champs because they just have a lot more CC. It's a lot more well-rounded. Yeah, I would just prefer them. But overall, Blitz can be really good, although, you know, he is one-dimensional. And then Bard. Bard's okay. He's kind of in a weird spot. I get asked about Bard all the time. Sometimes he has a really high win rate, but he has fallen off pretty hard. Where is he? I think. Actually, not that hard. He's still number 4. I was like, where is he at? Because he was, like, number 2. I think he might have even snuck into number 1 at one point in the preseason for, like, a week or two. But he's just still kind of a one-trick champion. The problem with Bard is that he just doesn't really have great itemization, and he has, like, no scaling. Like, his ult and his E literally have no ratios on them. So that's kind of awkward. He does scale a little bit with the meeps, obviously, but he's kind of a weird champ. Like, you can make some really good plays with him, but it takes a lot of practice, and I just feel like you're working really hard for something that other people can get a lot easier. So he's alright. My biggest knock is the 500 range feels really short for a champion that heavily relies on attack range. Now, I talked about this last time, I think, a little bit, but people have been like doing this really weird build on him. I don't know if pros are doing it or not. But yeah, more and more people are doing like this dead man's plate into rapid fire. It's extremely inefficient, but you know, people are winning on it, I guess. It says it has a 62% win rate. So more and more people are trying that out. I mean, it does give you more movement speed, does give you a bit more resilience. To me, it just feels like a meme build. You see a lot of the people, at least Hoyt, anyways, is still just going for a more traditional, like Shirelia's into redemption type of build. Like, the big problem with this is, like, Deadman's 2,900 gold. It's very expensive. It's very cost inefficient. So, and then Rapid Fire Cannon, same thing. You're not going to have any other crit items. You're buying it strictly for the extra range most of the time, just so you can try to get your passive, or get your slow procced on people with your meeps. So, it's okay. But you notice a lot of people who are doing this kind of build are losing, and the people who are doing the more traditional builds are having a higher win rate. At least that's what it seems to me. I didn't count it up, but either way, he's okay. I think there are going to be more reliable options, but he could work. Now, Sona is one of the last ones that I'll talk about here. So she is getting a buff. She can move around herself a lot faster. So that will help her with rotations. That'll help her with back timings. But I still think she's going to be squishy. If people get ahead of a hold of her, she is going to die. But she does have still really nice contributions to teamfight later. Her ult is a really good... you can combo that really well with Misfortune specifically. Whenever you ult as Sona, then Misfortune channels her ult. That's a great teamfighting tool. Or with someone like Rumble or Jarvan or just anyone else that's going to win a teamfight. Sona is going to be pretty solid in that situation. She does have pretty good poke as long as you don't get all in engaged early on. She is kind of a mana hog, but they did bring back the 50% mana on Frostfang, so that does help out. Especially if you rush Athenes, you get an extra 10 AP. You know, that's a pretty good value, over 200 gold extra value there, so she's okay. I don't think this is magically going to bring her back up to the top, but I think that she might end up winning, you know, maybe an extra 0.5% to 1%. I was kind of wrong about Nami, though. I really underestimated just how much that would help her out, so we'll see. Maybe Sona will get the same thing. The Karma buff is nice. I don't think it fixes a lot of the problems with her. She is very good early on. She can be really oppressive. Adding that extra damage does matter. Just her mid to late game is still going to be a little questionable. I wish they'd bring back the movement speed a bit more on her. But, excuse me, but anyways, she's all right. Lulu is getting a buff on this patch, but like I talked about in the patch notes video, be sure to go check that out if you haven't seen that. She still is mostly single target, mostly just very low scaling, like low AP ratios. Her ult doesn't have any scaling with plus healing and shielding. She doesn't have a healing lane, so she can get bullied out. So she's okay. I think there are going to be better options for the most part still available out there. Pyke's alright. He has very little defense, but if you do get ahead, you can snowball really hard with the gold. I just think if you don't get super far ahead, then he can get outscaled by some of the other champs out there. I think that things like Nautilus and Leona, if they get a hold of him, they're just going to bust him up. He is one of the only other champions with Rakan who has a free dash, though, so he can get, meaning it doesn't have to target anybody, so you can just jump over walls, which means he's going to be super good at vision control if you rush that Umbral item that's like a free extra sweeper. You can go invisible, infiltrate the enemy jungle, get those deep wards down. If they spot you, you can still run out with your E. So it allows him to have supreme vision control, even a little bit better than Rakan, and you're going to be really good on roams. The problem is, unlike Rakan, you're just a lot less flexible. You're kind of all in on trying to get those kills. You don't have the defensive stuff. You don't have the shields. So he's still going to be okay. He's just a little bit more one-dimensional, but he is very, very good at what he does. He does generate a lot of extra gold for his team if he does get those kills, and he does have really good vision control. Morgana's the last one that I'll mention here. She's an okay counter pick. We've seen it several times on stream. You know, she's supposed to hard counter Rakan, and like Nautilus and Leona, but there just are ways around her. You can still, play around her Black Shield. It's a very long cooldown. Her Q is still going to be a long cooldown. Her W basically isn't an ability. Like, you get a little bit of push in the laning phase, but it doesn't help that much. And her ult is like half an ability. Like, the slow is nice. If you do land the stun, that can be pretty good. But it's pretty much, she has a really long bind on her Q, and her Black Shield does offer some really good CC protection for one target. But I just think a lot of times it's just not enough. It's not enough reason to play her. But, it could be okay. The more, options that your team has for hard carry on champions that are susceptible to CC, the more valuable Morgana becomes. So if you have someone like a Katarina or something like that, and you can Black Shield the cat so that no one can interrupt her while she's, channeling her ult and zipping around, getting all these resets and fights, that can be super oppressive and very strong, especially if you max shield first. So if you get 3 points of Q in lane and then start maxing shield after that, that can be really, really strong. If you have someone that's like a hyper carry, like a Twitch or a Jinx or something like that, then the Black Shield can be really useful too. So it just kind of depends on your comp, but she's a primarily a counter pick and a protector of squishy hard carry champs. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. Check out the rest of the content on the channel, and we'll see everybody next time. Have a great day.